the entity that is stalking, right? This is no takeoff. This is stalking. They're miles away, hovering over the senior citizen complex. This is engineer light. All right, the entity is doing so while this is where the fake sun is preparing to rise. This is the crime scene where the people of the state are monitoring, walking outside of the property. Stalking, that's Eddie, who's going to prison. All right, doing so while the entity's stalking by helicopter. Remember that spectacular evidence sitting around like nothing's happening is going to be the evidence to have the psychopaths committed while they're engaged in the pattern of conduct. And this is where the sun is rising, right here, yonder, over the University of Laverne, where the entity has engineer light appearing on the building. The entity is doing so while they are monitoring what it is that I'm doing on the internet. Southwest Airlines is the stalker immediately preceding this video at 6:03 a.m. And this video, this image is what they're doing seconds earlier at 6:01 a.m. while the entity is monitoring what I'm doing on the internet, which is publishing on the Google Drive. So while I open up, this is what monitoring your device is entailing. Everything that you're doing, every physical move that you make while the people surround you and the people are surrounding you and the entity is engaging what is stalking you, there is no takeoff here. The entity that is targeting here is targeting with the people who are in relevant position to you in that environment. This is the entity that has conceded mental illness in the same way they've conceded criminal stalking in the most absurdly deranged manners. And this is the HIV infected U.S. military that have defamed my character while they suffer what are incurable disease based on the mentally ill practices of this cult that have engaged in targeting. There are no flights from the airport that include this conduct that would be heard or that would be hovering in this manner. That's Alaska Airlines. It's 6:04 a.m. And remember, the city of Ontario that's committing a battery, this is the movement of the fake moon, by the way, that's hovering over the same apartment complex in alignment to me as I move. Alaska Airlines, that was Southwest Airlines at 6:01. It's 6:04 a.m. This is the entity that's maintaining flights where they're not taking off. Remember what the entity is doing while I am west of this location, and the entity is stalking at the Superior Grocery store under the fake sun, inside of that laundromat where I'm inside of the 815 West Holt, and the entity is maintaining this hovering elevation over that laundromat where I'm walking outside and showing you stalking. This is what the entity is doing east of that location, stalking in concert with the people of the state. His shadow is appearing on that tree. He's monitoring, pacing and walking back. That is Eddie, who is going to federal prison. Okay, this is the entity engaging in this conduct as an entity, and this is also relevant to this right here, the departures. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. The entity is stalking by what is Southwest Airlines at 6:01 a.m. The entity is stalking by that was Alaska Airlines, and the entity is taking off from what are flights AS 607 Alaska Airlines that's going to Seattle out of gate 205. That will be a takeoff from the airport, and there are no takeoffs here, which is readily identifiable. There are no takeoffs miles away from the airport hovering over the senior citizen complex, in the same way there are no takeoffs miles away, even more west, when the entity is hovering over the spin laundry over my head while I'm at that laundromat on Holt Boulevard, which is not a straight shot even here. The entity is flying again in the direction which would be along Holt Boulevard, which is south of this location. This is P.O.C. This is evidence speaking to what is the prosecution of the commercial airline companies who are being prosecuted for levying war against an American citizen who kept evidence pertaining to the people of the state's engagement in the pattern of conduct by the U.S. military. This is P.O.C. This is psychopathic behavior, pacing, which exceeds stalking. And it is accompanied by molestation by engineer light, while the entity is engaging in what is monitoring the entity monitoring on the internet. Right? Yeah, there's no takeoff there. And the entities engage in this while they are monitoring the evidence, okay? These are ongoing concessions and admissions in the specific environment that the entity is stalking, okay? This is the mentally ill that engage in that conduct. They are going to prison and they're going to mental institutions, and the people of the state that include United Airlines, American Airlines, Alaska Airlines, Frontier Airlines, Delta Airlines, Southwest Airlines, The entity is also stalking by UPS, Amazon Prime, FedEx Air, while they are gang stalking through all of the commercial airline companies, including Starlux. Starlux doesn't have to be stalking right here at the Senior Center to be prosecuted. The Ontario International Airport is a facilitating venue that was supposed to be the guise where these homosexuals, these HIV-infected cult members, the unintelligent U.S. military that gang stalking with the state of California are supposed to hide behind the mere presence of an airport, and that is supposed to be the basis whereby you are being defamed. Oh, nobody is stalking you in planes. There's an airport and they're flying over everyone. What is it that you're talking about? And I've broken down exactly what I'm talking about. In fact, it's a matter of judicial notice what I'm talking about, that you are targeting in the specific environment. Moreover, they're targeting while I'm publishing evidence on the internet about it, and they're doing so while they are inherently targeting by even being in the sky space. Not only being in the sky space, but hovering throughout the city, as the evidence shows, and also engaging in the asininity of doing cartwheels and backflips over a residential area where the senior citizens are residing and where the fake sun rises and sets, which is the specific environment. While the entity engages in what is unpersuasive as well, stalking by helicopter, oh, nothing's happening. Oblivious to it. Stalking by planes, nothing is happening. I'm concerned with what it is that I'm doing, and the entity's doing this in the specific environment. These are psychopaths that are gang stalking. Subject to involuntary commitments as well. This is a current side of what is published on the internet. These companies are being criminally and civilly prosecuted. They are the mask of the government that has been exposed, and these companies have therefore been exposed, and they intentionally provide planes for the government to conceal their identity, and it is no ongoing disguise whatsoever. They are sharing in the criminal activity, and you will be, by the way, prosecuted under all circumstances where the U.S. entity, where the U.S. government is monitoring and you provide anything. They're at your venue, you're engaging in light activity, you're engaging in criminal presence, including where you live, you will be federally prosecuted. That's the entity that follows in that environment. The commercial airline companies are being prosecuted pursuant to that inevitable P.O.C. They are, this is malice while the entity is stalking in commercial planes. All right, this is the entity that is doing so, and I want to be clear: stalking will never the evidence that you are a. It is evidence that you are indeed stalking. That's the military in a jet. The entity is doing the same thing while they're stalking in helicopters. This is what the entity is doing west of this location, if you'll recall. Alright, this is the entity that is stalking while I am at the laundromat. This is the entity that is amplifying plane activity inside of the laundromat where I'm at. The laundromat where the entity is keeping the fake sun at 5:02 p.m. in the same city of Ontario over me. This is the same laundromat where inside, and this is evidence of a impossible light activity fills the laundromat where the entity is stalking me by commercial planes. Impossible light projected horizontally through the venue, creating my shadow on the wall while they're monitoring me in the bathroom, monitoring my genitalia. These homosexuals with HIV of the U.S. military that are engaging in this stalking conduct, and like what Eddie is doing, like nothing is happening while they are monitoring in this environment. This is what the people of the state is. This is what their code of conduct is, to behave as though nothing is happening while they are stalking as a population. And it is remaining evidence of mental illness. This is the entity that is stalking. These homosexuals that are exceedingly annoying. It's very pathetic. They're following around, and this is what they're doing on Hope Boulevard. I will remind you about all the license plates that I documented. They are documented as terrorists. They are going to be federally prosecuted as. This is the U.S. military as well, stalking all night long. This is documentation. And this is the entity stalking this morning at 5:10 a.m. All right, this is the entity that's engaged in that conduct, and the people of the state are being federally prosecuted. This is the pattern. They're being federally prosecuted for criminal activity for terrorism, and it is treason. They're engaging in interstate commerce. They're going across state lines, and they are going outside of the U.S., and they are sharing the pattern of conduct with the U.S. military. This is P.O.C. It is currently 6:11 a.m.